Hey, it's the Magnificent One. So today I want to go through one of the long forgotten anti-heroes that Marvel produced. This is from the early '90s. This is called Foolkiller. This is actually, for me, was one of my favorite series to read as a kid. It's about kind of like the Punisher, who's maybe not as skilled as Frank Castle. So the story itself is about this guy named Kurt, and he takes on the mantle of the Fool Killer. So let's get into it. So we're just gonna start off. This is actually done by J.J. Birch, all the artwork, and it's decent. It's pretty good. You know, there's some unique things he does in here. Solid work. Nothing too fancy, but I mean, faces are good. The way everything's drawn is kind of makes sense. I love these old ads from like the '90s in here. And then Steve Gerber is the guy who actually writes the story. Yeah, so it's interesting. It starts off as essentially this guy who's just life has hit him pretty hard. So like his dad gets beaten up because it's one of those things where like his dad's in the an old neighborhood that kind of gets taken over and kind of goes down the drain, and at the same time he loses his job. He's got like a really good uh, white collar job, and then he basically, as the economy goes to crap, ends up working in a burger joint. His wife leaves him, so everything's really not going his way, and that's the essence of the first issue. And at the same time, there's a guy who called himself the Fool Killer, the original guy, who's now in prison. But what he does is he goes on a talk show, and it's one of those things where like they bring him on television to tell his story, and then this guy Kurt, he ends up being inspired by him, actually reaches out to him, starts talking, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh man, like the old Fool Killer looks at this guy and he's like, hey, this guy's got potential. Let's make him the new Fool Killer, right? And so he sends him this gun. And this is really unique because the Fool Killer has no superpowers, but what he has is he has this gun that disintegrates people. Um, so essentially, like they make them into big piles of dust. I don't know how else to describe it, but it's unique because you see some of like the old computer stuff that was going on in the early '90s before the internet is what it was today. Like guys using modems and stuff. When I was a kid when I read this, I thought this was like the um, darkest book I read as a child. And there's stuff like Watchmen. There's the Sin City stuff that was kind of came out a little after this, but this was more like, hey, this is a guy having a bad series of days, and this is what can end up happening. And you see, so this is what I was talking about, like the gun. It does this thing where it just turns people into like clouds of dust. The weird thing is like it seems to be the color of whatever they're wearing. So like if they're red, they're like a red cloud of dust. Later you'll see like, man, I love these old trading cards and stuff. That was pretty sick back in the day. Um, and you see how it kind of disintegrates them, right? Now, what happens is this is his journey of how he becomes like a poor man's Batman. So he starts training himself. He starts like doing things like he's working on a burger joint on the fry wheel. So he's like, if I just touch this, I can make myself immune to the heat and the pain. He starts pitting trash in his apartment, rolling around in it, doing all kinds of stuff. Learns to fight by like talking to his coworker who does like self defense, who has taken self defense classes, and that's how he learns to fight. But like stuff does not go well for this guy ever. Like the basic stuff of being a superhero, he keeps screwing up, right? And you'll see there's some dark stuff in here. Like there's a like this is a chick who used to help the old Fool Killer while she's scarred for life from like an acid attack. Just this weird stuff that's probably not meant for like the 12-year-old kid who's reading a comic book. But like, it gets into some weird stuff. Like there's no lady who like accuses him of rape. There's like, divorce. There's privacy information being, discussed, all that kind of stuff. So it's just weird, and this guy's life is just going to hell. This is like him training. So this is where that chick's like teaching him basic self defense. Because what happens is he realizes like, oh, I can be a hero, but like I keep getting my ass kicked. So maybe I gotta do something. That's him training himself not to feel pain. Um, Rolling in trash, taking super hot showers to numb himself. You know, he's playing with rats. You know, it's it's I guess not the glorious way of you would think as a superhero, but you can see like this compared to like where he starts off at. He's obviously a lot more badass in this picture than he was in this one. This one he's still kind of silly, doesn't know what he's doing. This is when he becomes, you know, the Foolkiller. I love this. It's like body count. This is where he basically starts like becoming a mass murderer. He just starts killing, you know, these kids are now like they're selling drugs. Well, hey man, that's enough for you to be disintegrated by the Foolkiller. And now he becomes this vigilante, and he starts kind of doing these strange letters. That's not a good day if you get chopped in half by a guy with a fool killing gun. Yeah, so the big thing, the reason I like this is, man, this is how a lot of people think. Like some of his thoughts, especially when we get into the next couple of issues, is he starts talking about like, you know, not only just the regular criminals in the streets, but just how people are just, you know, dumb. You know, and that society itself rewards people who are lazy, and that's what's frustrating, right? You know, and so you'll see like a lot of, so there is a lot of dialogue in this book that balances out the action, but it's kind of, he's got this perspective of he's seeing people on the street because he lives in a crappy apartment doing crimes. He's got the white collar example of people kind of screwing other people over, people being unethical in all kinds of different situations. And he basically goes, I'm going to go after them all, right? Out of all the issues, this one right here, issue number 7, this is my favorite because it's talks about regret, right? So this guy, like I said, this is dark stuff. This guy's thinking about committing suicide. You know, just kind of a long story short, he kills a kid, like a little kid by accident. The kid was trying to kill him, but like, so he's obviously traumatized by this. You know, the kid threw a knife at him, stuck in his shoulder. This is like this lady who's always constantly accusing him of rape. This guy's life is in shambles, and this does a real good job of kind of building this up. Now, I don't know why, like, how this came about, this book, because if you think about it, it's not too connected with anything else, and it's amazing that Marvel took the risk of putting together a 10-issue series of for a book that basically had no basis in anything else other than he made a couple of appearances in some, you know, minor roles in a comic book before, and that wasn't even this guy. That was the original Foolkiller, right? So it's cool that they took this chance and created this, and it's a great story, man. I mean, and first of all, you can pick up this entire story probably for like $5, man. Like these books are not like expensive by any means. You could probably get them at a quarter bin somewhere. I love the 1980s movies, and there's some interesting thoughts. Basically, this is where this guy, you know, starts thinking about like, hey, people just don't try anymore, you know, and he starts getting into the psychosis of society is going to fail because of lack of effort, you know, and so like you can imagine, he starts punishing people for the crimes which are less and less brutal in nature. You know, first he's going after murderers and killers and drug dealers. Now he's going after like, in this case, this is a guy beating his, well, he's probably a pimp beating his girl, as they say. But then the weird thing is, it's like, okay, so he beats up the pimp, but then the girl is like, hey, why are you doing that? You know, and basically now he's starting to kill not just people who are criminals, but people he recognizes as what he calls fools. You know, that's what I was saying. Like, you can see the color of the disintegrated dirt that people become is slightly different based on what the people are wearing and stuff, and skin color. And now he starts kind of becoming this person, almost like the Zodiac Killer, where he's writing messages to the newspapers. And they get published. But yeah, I like this episode because this kind of takes everything in the entire series and sums it up in one small issue of this guy who's basically struggling with everything that is going on in his life, struggling with what he's done, and then do like regretting it, but still finding the reason why he does it and what he wants to do. And it basically sees his spiral into deep psychosis there. Then we've got Spider-Man. He this is really interesting because this kind of shows how probably the rest of the Marvel universe acts, you know, when they see a superhero. Because obviously a superhero is fighting big crimes, right? They're taking on the Kingpin, they're taking on these intergalactic villains. Here it's like, oh, Spider-Man just sees a riot going on and he tries to break it up. But you don't catch all the other stuff. You know, this is a nuance. Basically, you have two people on the side of the original Desert Storm incident conflict going on. Then and again, it does get a little wordy. There is a lot of talking heads, but it's good stuff. It's not. It's interesting because you would think a book like this with so many different perspectives would be very political, and it's not. What it does do is it does present a lot of different viewpoints, and it basically the end of the day kind of goes. Both viewpoints are kind of stupid, so people get killed on both sides of it. So that's kind of it. And then as things wrap up, it's really interesting because what's happening is now the cops are kind of coming down on him, and it's really just him trying to survive and make it to the end. And he comes up with a scheme. I won't spoil it, but of how to get out of it. And so now essentially Kurt is trying to make it out alive, while he's also trying to kill the original bad guy in here is essentially a big time drug dealer who he saw murder somebody right near his neighborhood. And so this is it. And then the climactic final episode is just him coming to resolution. And I won't spoil the end, but you can kind of see that he's got scheming his way to get out. You know, when I was a kid, I used to see this ad. I never figured out what it was, like exactly. I was like, so this is this weird ad where like they had this thing where you'd call up and you would pay to play this game, and I guess they'd be like, hey, we're gonna say that there's some sort of situation going on, and you have to select the right X-Men to win the game, and then if you do it correctly, you get prizes. I never called the number, but I always thought there was, like for me, I was confused as a kid. I'm kind of think I'm still confused by what the rules were for this game. But you see that ad everywhere for a series of time. But anyhow, this is it. So Foolkiller, man, this is I don't know why, but I always thought this was the best single series that I've read coming out of Marvel. And that's a weird thing to say because it's one, it's unheard of. Two, it's really cheap. Like there's nothing you like these issues are probably worth 10 cents each. But it's a good story, and I don't know if a lot of people ever talk about it. But I would recommend just picking it up, man. You know, spend the $5 to get the entire series, read through it. It's a cool little tale of torment. Here's Tears of Torment. This is a tale of torment. So that's all it is. I would check it out. So Foolkiller, you know, I would recommend it. Spend a couple of days reading through it. It's a cool story. You'll like it. If you like stuff like The Punisher or Daredevil, where it's the struggles of being a vigilante, go check it out. And at the end of the day, man, this is one of those things where you have a surprisingly good story with pretty decent art. You know, it's nothing that's gonna blow your mind, but like everything's solid. Everything throughout this book is really solid. You don't see like anything that's funky, anything that's gonna you know, be out of the ordinary. A lot of panels, that's the other thing. So you do feel like you get a lot more story than with most comic books. But yeah, I'd check it out. All right. Thanks, guys. Hey, check out my Indiegogo. I still got it up. It's nearing the end for my Kinetic comic book. That's something I've been working on for a little while now. So if you guys want to check that out, feel free to do so. Other than that, have a good one, guys. I'll talk to you later.